Live every day as if it were the last, because before you know it, time goes past and life's just not that long. Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone. Taste the wind, don't let it blow on by. Sing songs of love, let the music get you high. And when it's said...
Prophet Martin Luther King Jr. damned the Vietnam War in his most controversial speech on April 4th, 1967, exactly 1 year before he was assassinated. King damned the U.S. mass murder of Vietnamese people. King said the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today is my own government. The so-called liberal media, the New York Times, Washington Post, many newspapers nationwide condemned King's strong message of truth. Many whites, many blacks, the White House, even most of King's inner circle of black leaders condemned his strong message of truth. King suffered much hatred, many death threats, FBI persecution. Why is his speech damning the Vietnam War far less known, far less honored than his I Have a Dream speech? Sadly, most King celebrations today castrate his message. Sadly, most King celebrations do not emphasize his strong stand against all nuclear weapons, against the Vietnam War, and against the evils of capitalism and the greedy U.S. empire. Martin Luther King Jr. was a prophet, not a politician, not a rock star. He refused to silence his conscience to get the popular support of millions. King refused to sell out his convictions to get the approval of the powerful. If your parents are still alive, and if you want to ask their forgiveness for anything, do it now. If you want to ask your mother or your dad personal questions about their lives, do it now. If you want to answer their personal questions about your life, your ways, your feelings, do it now. If you want to thank your mother or your dad, if you want to compliment them, if you want to confront them nonviolently, do it now. Tomorrow is not guaranteed to anyone on earth. Many people, millions of people, stand with overwhelming regrets at silent graves. I strongly recommend this book, Firewater: How Alcohol is Killing My People and Yours, by Cree Indian Harold Johnson of Canada. I know of no other book by a Native American that so powerfully damns booze. I drink no booze. Booze has devastated the lives and killed many of my dear friends. Get the book, this book, from our Albuquerque Public Library, Firewater: How Alcohol is Killing My People and Yours by Harold Johnson. The weapons designed for many years at Sandia Labs and Los Alamos Labs are aimed to murder far more men, women, and children than the many millions Hitler and the Nazis killed in the concentration camps, the gas ovens, and World War II. And even if the U.S. never again drops nuclear bombs on cities, the billions of dollars, the vast resources, the brain power to make the bombs are stolen from the poor of this world. The billions of dollars, the vast resources, the brain power to make those bombs could provide decent shelter, clean water, nutritious food for many millions of poor people. And these bombs are murdering poor people now. These poor people are just as dead as if someone lined them up and blew out their brains. And even if the U.S. never again drops nuclear bombs on cities, the radioactive and chemical contamination from the weapons labs, from the weapons factories, from the weapons testing can make sick and kill multitudes of people for thousands of years. Multitudes of children born deformed or retarded. Multitudes of people with cancer and devastated immune systems. The cleanup costs for the nuclear bombs, radioactive and chemical poisons in the United States alone is $300 billion or more. And even if the U.S. never again drops nuclear bombs on cities, these bombs are a constant backup threat against many nations of poor people worldwide, to keep them down, to keep them under the bloody terrorist control of the U.S. empire and multinational corporations, robbing those nations of their labor and their national resources, keeping the poor in economic slavery to the United States empire. And some of you working at Sandia and Los Alamos Weapons Lab, Lockheed Martin, Kirtland Air Force Base, are torn inside, in your conscience, some of you, just as many U.S. white people were torn in their conscience 200 years ago about enslaving black people. I urge you, repent, quit your job in mass murder. In Germany under Hitler, many Germans said they needed jobs, and times were bad. So they took jobs at the death camps, slaughtering millions of Jews, gypsies, gays, handicapped, communists, Jehovah's Witnesses. And these Germans running the death camps excused themselves that it was for national security. They said those prisoners were the curse of the nation. The guards, the secretaries in the Nazi concentration camps were clean, came to work on time, carefully dressed, polite to their friends, joked with each other, and mass murdered people for a paycheck. Many Nazi officers wore shoes polished to a perfect shine. Many secretaries typed fast with no mistakes. But all for what? To hold jobs officially murdering human beings. The same damn crimes against humanity, and much worse today at Sandia Weapons Lab, Los Alamos Weapons Lab, Lockheed Martin, Kirtland Air Force Base. Albuquerque's worst criminal insanity is nuclear bombs. And many of you well-dressed, carefully manicured women who work at Sandia and Los Alamos Labs, Lockheed Martin, Kirtland Air Force Base, you would not want any blood on your car seat or on your living room carpet. But preparing to shed oceans of other people's blood is your daily business. And many of you well-dressed church-going women at Sandia and Los Alamos Weapons Lab, Lockheed Martin, Kirtland Air Force Base would be ashamed as hell to sell your body for money on East Central. But you sell your conscience. You sell your brain. You sell your career year after year to nuclear bombs and war making. And this is far worse evil than selling bodies on East Central. And many of you men in well-pressed suits and uniforms would be ashamed as hell to have your son or daughter sell drugs to hustle money. But you sell your conscience. You sell your brain. You sell your career to the gods of war, money, and U.S. empire. You parents working on the weapons of mass murder, some of you tell your children an honest B in school is better than a dishonest A. Well, yes, that's right. But do you not realize that a life-giving job at minimum wage is infinitely better than a mass murder job at Los Alamos and Sandia Weapons Labs, Lockheed Martin, Kirtland Air Force Base? No matter how large your paycheck, and no matter how many your fringe benefits, and no matter how much status in the community. Talk about street gangs showing no conscience in drive-by shootings. What about gangs of scientists, secretaries, suppliers who show no conscience in preparing the bombings of whole cities of men, women, and kids? Talk about the 9/11 atrocity at the World Trade Center, Sandia and Los Alamos Weapons Lab, Lockheed Martin, Kirtland Air Force Base is far worse, terrorizing and targeting many whole nations. Sandia Weapons Lab, Kirtland Air Force Base, Los Alamos Weapons Lab, Lockheed Martin. The worst violent murder gangs in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Los Alamos up north, committing far more violence than all the street gangs combined. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not defending the evil that many street gangs commit. But I'm saying that on a scale, these official places of preparing mass murder, destroy far more people and resources than all the street gangs combined. And where are the New Mexico priests and preachers, community leaders, politicians, newspaper editors, business leaders who have the conscience and the courage to say this publicly over and over again? I love passion in romance. I love passion in living all of life. I want my passion always to be guided by compassion for all people. Passion by itself is like a fire. It can keep us from freezing to death, or it can kill us. Passion by itself is like a river. It can irrigate my crops to keep me alive, or it can kill me in a flood. I love passion, but I want my passion always to be guided by compassion for all people. And in life, sometimes what first seemed blessings turn out to be curses. And sometimes what first seemed curses turn out to be blessings. I'm deeply indebted to many people, a great variety of people, who have taught me, loved me, inspired me. I constantly collect wisdom on how to live and how not to live. I constantly collect wisdom to live it as best I can and to share it with anyone interested. In romance between a man and a woman, or between men, or between women, often one is more attracted than the other. Often one is ready to go deeper and more personal in conversation than the other. Often one is more free than the other in sex, licking the whole body, including the asshole. The more eager one needs to be patient, the more eager one needs to be patient with the partner, or find another partner more open, more ready. Because if we try to pry open a rosebud, we can ruin the rose. Chemotherapy for cancer is at best a gamble. Chemotherapy does not help many cancer patients. It may help some, but many it does not help to recover, to feel better, to live longer. Chemotherapy is no benefit at all to many cancer patients. Chemotherapy makes the legal drug pushers, the big drug companies, filthy rich. Chemotherapy often causes horrible human misery. Chemotherapy is legal poison. And chemotherapy targets the cancer, but often the chemotherapy kills the patient first before it kills the cancer. Many cancer doctors would not allow chemotherapy to be given to themselves or to their families. They know better. Many cancer doctors know chemotherapy seldom helps, often harms. Chemotherapy kills many cancer patients. No chemotherapy for me, never, hell no. Much better to prevent cancer and to heal cancer naturally. Changing what we eat, getting enough sleep, exercise, sunshine, using many different herbs that can fortify the immune system, and cutting out all sugar shit, ice cream, cake, cookies, candy, sodas, because sugar shit and cow's milk products feed cancer, worsen cancer. What right does the United States have to demand that other nations stop the flow of heroin and cocaine to the United States when the United States government and U.S. tobacco companies push their cigarettes on other nations? U.S. cigarettes kill more people in other nations than the U.S. people killed by heroin and cocaine that come from other nations. Now, don't get me wrong, I despise, I reject heroin and cocaine and cigarettes and booze. All of them are poison, slow poison to our bodies. Remember always that police carry deadly weapons and can shoot you and kill you. Avoid all hassles with police if possible. Never argue with police. Never run from police. Never argue with anyone who is drunk on hate or rage or booze. Drink no booze. Carry no gun or other deadly weapon. Never argue with anyone who carries a deadly weapon. Do your damnedest to avoid problems with the police. Carry no gun. Do not argue with them. Do not run from them. Do not insult them. They can kill you. A pregnant mother who drinks booze can cause her body to have can cause her baby to have a small head and brain and mental retardation. A pregnant mother who drinks booze can cause her baby to have facial deformities and to grow slowly. A pregnant mother who drinks booze can cause her baby to have heart defects and poor coordination, vision and behavior problems, and hyperactivity. Please, pregnant mothers, drink no booze. None. Zero. During the Vietnam War, over 500,000, over 500,000 U.S. men refused the U.S. military draft. I congratulate them. I thank them for refusing to go to war. 200,000 were prosecuted. 8,750 were convicted of draft evasion. 34,000 U.S. soldiers were court-martialed and sent to prison. U.S. soldiers, 34,000, court-martialed and sent to prison for opposing the Vietnam War. They were heroes of conscience. And just the other day, I watched one of the best documentaries I've ever seen in my life, called The Boys Who Said No, about the many young men during the Vietnam who burned their draft cards. Some of them went to prison because they refused to kill and to die for this empire in Vietnam. Heroes of conscience. Our family had many serious problems. After my mother died, I'm glad my dad did not reject and disown me for being the most well-known, openly gay man and nudist in that farm community where I grew up in Illinois. My many controversial, sincere letters published in the local newspaper there did not cause him to reject me, to disown me, even though he was so afraid of what other people think and say. I'm glad that my mother took me from an early age, when she was living, to many funerals and visitations for neighbors, friends, relatives who died. When I was 6 or 7, my great-uncle Clem, in his 80s, died. My mother and I went to his funeral in the small town of Dakota, Illinois. And before his coffin was closed, the undertaker asked if anyone wanted to come up for a final viewing. I did. My mother went with me. And that started a tradition in my life. When my mother died in 1982, I was the last person before her coffin was closed. I kissed her. And when my beloved Don died at 25 in 1989 from a car crash, I was the last person. I kissed him before his coffin was closed. And when my dad died in 1994, I was the last person, and I kissed him before his coffin was closed. I love the old song, "Save the Last Dance for Me." I'm so glad my mother did not shield me from death and funerals. We all die sooner or later. I've gone to dozens of funerals. I'm so glad my mother welcomed my being open and honest with her about my being gay, even though she told me she had never known there were gay people in the world before I came out to her when I was 31, soon after I first had sex with any male. A few years later, she told me she would like to be a mouse in the corner to watch me have sex with a man. And I really, truly wish that had happened, but sadly it never did. I'm so glad I could be open with my mother about my sex with men. And sadly, many millions of sons and daughters, gay, bi, or straight, cannot imagine their mother being that open and curious to watch them, the sons and daughters, having sex. I'm so glad my mother treasured truth. She hated all lies, all bullshit. And why do many sons and daughters, even as adults, hide their feelings, their actions from their parents? Many people hide the truth and cover up with lies if, when they were kids, they feared punishment and loss of love from parents and other adults if they told the truth. Imagine standing outside casinos and certain churches. Ask the fathers and mothers coming out from the casinos or certain churches this question. If you had a son and had to choose between either having your son join the military, go to war, kill men, or having your adult son tell you he enjoys sex and romance with men, which, as his parents, would you prefer? Sadly, many, if not most, parents would prefer their son going to war, killing men, if they knew their son would come home alive and not injured, murdering men instead of being in love and making love with men. How crazy, how evil such attitudes. Cigarette smoking kills hundreds of thousands every year in the United States. Smoking causes lung cancer, emphysema, chronic bronchitis. Smoking makes pneumonia, tuberculosis, flu, colds, asthma worse. Smokers die twice as often from cancer as people who do not smoke, and not just lung cancer. Besides lung cancer, cigarettes can cause mouth cancer, cancer of the throat, cancer of the pancreas, cancer of the cervix, cancer of the kidneys, bladder cancer, colon cancer, and bone marrow cancer, besides lung cancer. Smoking cigarettes can cause all of those cancers. Many deaths from heart disease are caused by smoking. Smoking not only harms the blood vessels of the heart, smoking also injures blood vessels all over the body, causing strokes, poor circulation in the legs and feet. Strokes can paralyze, put the person in a wheelchair, and keep that person from speaking normally. Smoking causes wrinkles. Think of how some beautiful young women spend many hours, hundreds of dollars, if not thousands, on making their skin look great. But if they smoke cigarettes, they're damaging their skin, causing wrinkles that could have been prevented. Having surgery is a greater risk for smokers than for non-smokers. Smokers require more anesthesia. They're more likely to have breathing problems connected with the surgery and to need extra oxygen. The wounds of smokers are slower to heal. Smokers have more broken bones because smoking weakens the bones. Some women smokers have more problems getting pregnant and having miscarriages, more complications during pregnancy and in giving birth. The babies of smoking mothers are more likely to be born premature, have more risk of sudden infant death syndrome, more risk of infant allergies, mental retardation, behavior problems. Living with a smoker causes hundreds of thousands of cases of bronchitis, pneumonia, ear infections, worsened asthma in young children. So if you really love your kids, why do you smoke cigarettes? Smoking lowers the sex hormone testosterone. Smoking causes many men not to have good hard-ons. Smoking causes the discs in the spine to go bad, resulting especially in low back pain. Smokers, why pay the filthy rich lying cigarette companies to make you sick, to kill you? Why be their fool, allowing them to addict you to their poison? I've had dear friends, many dear friends, who smoked cigarettes. I love my friends, but I hate cigarettes. I would not smoke a cigarette for all the money in this world. Parents who hit and beat their children were not held, hugged, and cuddled enough when they were children. Adults who are starved for affectionate sexual pleasure often hit and beat their kids. Most violent adults have little or no affectionate sexual pleasure in their lives. Affectionate sexual pleasure drives violence out of our hearts and lives. Warmly affectionate societies are not as likely to be physically violent. Societies which give their babies the most fondling, the most caresses, have less stealing, commit little or no torture, mutilation, and killing of enemies. Societies that slap and hit their babies treat women badly, put men above women, and worship gods that are cruel, mean monsters. If a person is warmly hugged and cuddled a lot as a baby, but is later denied affectionate sexual pleasure as a teenager, that person may still become violent. But if a person receives little or no hugging and cuddling as a baby, but later enjoys affectionate sexual pleasure as a teenager, that person can heal from being starved for affection early in life and not become violent. When a person is starved for caressing and fondling as a baby and is also later forbidden affectionate sexual pleasure as a teenager, that person is very likely to be violent, whether to other family members or as a cop or a street gang member or a soldier. Affectionate body pleasure throughout life drives out violence. Societies that have strict taboos against sex outside of marriage are usually more violent, often become addicted to war, worship mean, cruel, monster gods. People deprived of affectionate body pleasure throughout life, especially as babies, children, and teenagers, usually become addicted to violence and war, in movies even, or video games. Many moviegoers are less offended seeing a woman's clothed breast stabbed than seeing a woman's naked breast kissed and caressed. Most U.S. parents are far less disturbed when their teenagers watch murder mysteries than when their teenagers watch couples making love on the screen. Insane. People whose parents seldom hugged and kissed them and instead hit and beat them are likely to become hostile, crazy, and mean when they drink booze. And these people sadly prefer booze rather than affectionate sexual pleasure. Booze and other drugs become a rotten, evil substitute for affectionate sexual pleasure. And these people would rather get drunk than stay sober and make love. Animals starved for being touched early in life mutilate their own bodies, and often as adults avoid being touched. For these animals, violence and pain replace body pleasure. People who curse affectionate sexual pleasure usually support spanking and hitting children to punish them. People who curse affectionate sexual pleasure often believe violence is the way to solve problems, and they often love their guns. Plenty of affectionate touching throughout life drives out physical violence. If you were starved for warm affection as a baby and as a small child, and if you also were forbidden affectionate sexual pleasure as a teenager, but now, as an adult, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, you see your great need for tender touching and being touched. Start where you are to change your life. Your healing takes time, determination. Make friends with men and women who enjoy giving and receiving hugs and massage. Reach out to find men or women you're attracted to and who are attracted to you to give and receive affectionate sexual pleasure. Enjoy making love to yourself. Pleasure yourself sexually with no shame, no guilt. We can heal regardless of our past. We can change with much help regardless of our past. Make love, not war, not addiction to violence. Many climate scientists know far more about the climate crisis than I will ever know or understand. I ask these climate scientists who know so much, have you made huge changes in how you live because of what you know about the climate catastrophe? Have you changed how you travel? How much you travel? The size of home you live in? Are you living much more simply because of what you know about the climate emergency? Have you stopped eating meat and dairy because animal agriculture is one of the main causes of the climate crisis? Have you stopped flying thousands of miles to climate conferences? Have you stopped flying thousands of miles for pleasure vacations? If not, what good is all your head information on the climate crisis? Many people who are not climate scientists may not take seriously the extreme danger if you, climate scientists, who know far more facts and figures than I will ever know or understand, or that most people will ever know and understand, if you refuse to change your lives. I thank many Jews in the United States and in Israel who have spoken out loud and clear publicly against the Israeli government's brutal oppression, mass murder of Palestinians. I congratulate hundreds of Israeli Jewish soldiers who have refused to be soldiers in the West Bank and Gaza because of the constant atrocities the Israeli government commits against the Palestinians. And one former Israeli soldier said that Israeli soldiers committed, quote, unimaginable practices against Palestinians, competing among themselves who could kill more Palestinians, bragging afterward about how many they killed, deliberately targeting and killing children simply walking home from school, and slamming the heads of handcuffed Palestinians into concrete walls. This was the testimony of a former Israeli soldier about the atrocities that many Israeli soldiers committed toward the Palestinians. Israel has illegally occupied and controlled the Palestinian territories, the West Bank and Gaza, for 56 years. The U.S. has used Israel in the Middle East to control the whole region. U.S. federal income tax dollars buy the tanks, the Israeli helicopters, the Israeli bulldozers, the Israeli missiles that the Israeli military uses to terrorize, cripple, blind, paralyze, make homeless, murder the Palestinian people. Israel receives billions of dollars every year from this U.S. government. Israel receives far more U.S. federal income tax dollars than any other nation on earth. Every U.S. federal income tax payer pays for Israeli atrocities against the Palestinians. The U.S. empire also supports corrupt, brutal Arab dictatorships in Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, in order to control the region. The U.S. empire sides with Israel against the Palestinians. And most all members of Congress and the major presidential candidates of both parties are scared to hell of speaking out for justice, for fairness, for peace, against the Israeli atrocities, largely because of the powerful pro-Israel lobby in Washington, D.C. The Israeli military has killed hundreds of Palestinian boys and girls. The Israeli military has wounded thousands more of Palestinian boys and girls. Scores of nations have often condemned Israeli persecution of Palestinians, but sadly, the United States government strongly supports Israeli atrocities against the Palestinians. I oppose all violence by Israelis against Palestinians, and I oppose all violence by Palestinians against Israelis. I strongly support peace, human rights for all people in Israel and in Palestine. Revenge and more violence are not the answer for Israelis or for Palestinians. I refuse to pay one damn bloody penny of U.S. federal income tax for Israel to rob, terrorize, torture, blind, paralyze, make homeless, murder the Palestinian people. I have paid no federal income tax, not one damn bloody penny, for 44 years. Almost 1/3 of U.S. federal income tax goes for Israeli atrocities, U.S. wars, past, present, and future, and for U.S. nuclear weapons. If you have a conscience, how can you pay it? Going to sleep 1 hour or more earlier and then getting up 1 hour or more earlier can help prevent major depression. I love to hug men and women of all ages and sizes and colors who enjoy hugging. Hugging can lower the stress hormone cortisol. Hugs can strengthen our immune system to keep us from getting sick. Hugs can help lower blood pressure and heart rate in stressful situations. I love to hug men and women who enjoy hugging. My favorite words from Albert Einstein, he said, "More and more, I have come to value charity and love of others above everything else. All our lauded technical progress, our very civilization is like an axe in the hand of a pathological criminal." Albert Einstein, my favorite quote, "More and more I have come to value charity and love of others above everything else. All our lauded technological progress, our very civilization is like an axe in the hand of a pathological criminal." And every culture on earth is a mix of kindness and cruelty. Every culture on earth is a mix of wisdom and stupidity. Every culture on earth is a mix of insight and insanity. And I aim to learn from and adopt the best from every culture, every person I meet, and reject the crap. From Afghanistan, heart-wrenching stories of families whose lives were ripped apart by the U.S. war on Afghanistan. A 6-year-old boy from Kabul, Fardan, was sound asleep next to his brothers and sisters when a terrifying bomb came barreling down from the sky, destroying his home and 5 others, leaving 15 people dead. Fardan survived, but he became like a baby. He stopped walking. He had to be carried all day long. He stopped talking except for high-pitched shrieks. He did not sleep through the night. He wet his bed. His family was too poor to take him to a doctor. Besides, there were only 8 psychiatrists in this traumatized nation of over 20 million people. Ozzy Zola was a healthy 20-year-old who worked with his father as a house painter. He was trying to save money so he could get married and have a family, but that dream was dashed when a U.S. bomb aimed at the Kabul airport instead hit his home. The debris that penetrated his left leg left him in excruciating pain. Not having decent medical care, his leg became infected and was chopped off above the knee. Ozzy Zola had no money to get a prosthetic leg or wheelchair. His family was borrowing money from friends and relatives to rebuild their home, putting them deep in debt. Another person, a woman, had always depended on the income of her husband, Abdul, to feed their 6 children. Abdul worked as a guard at a marble pit until a U.S. bomb aimed at a Taliban garrison near the mine hit him, and left with 6 small children, no income. His wife cried and cried. She was ashamed of sending her children out to beg for food. She pleaded for help to keep her children from starving. If we have a conscience, how can we pay 1 penny of federal income tax for such atrocities around the world? Do we realize why millions of people all over the world hate and fear the U.S. government? Malcolm X, the black activist, said the worst crime whites have committed toward blacks is teaching us to hate ourselves for being black. And as a longtime gay activist, I say one of the worst crimes many, not all, many preachers, priests, rabbis, imams, parents, teachers have committed toward us who are gay, lesbian, or bisexual is teaching us to hate and reject ourselves for whom we are in love with, for whom we are sexually attracted to. I warmly thank Mark and Eddie for their excellent help dozens of times for many months running the cameras and controls for this program. And thanks to all of you watching. If you see me on the street and you want to talk, just stop for a few minutes. I love heart-to-heart conversations. I love personal questions. To your health, my fresh piss. Good night.
Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone. Taste the wind, don't let it blow on by. Sing songs of love, let the music get you high, and when it's said and done, you'll know the sun will shine on. And when it's said and done, you'll know the sun will shine on.